Well, it's been a minute, a couple months actually. This is going to complete the series that I started that was instructional, and it was in the art process playlist as well about how to make an abstract painting. So we did a lot of talking, and we finally ended up putting some texture on this canvas here, with some gesso, some physical texture. And then I didn't come back to it until right now. Like I said, it's been a couple months, and I was not anticipating that at all. Just a lot of things ended up happening, and I've made art in between since I've made that video last of putting the gesso on and the texture and explaining that. I just haven't been in the mood to do this piece. So one thing that we talk about with abstract painting is just kind of like what are we feeling, what are we going for, where are we drawing our inspiration from? If you didn't watch any of those videos, I would suggest watching those. They're in the art process playlist, but also in the instructional playlist, which is much shorter, as most of those videos come from this series of how to make an abstract painting. So today we're finally going to paint this piece. I feel like I'm in the mood. It's never going to be exactly the same place I was when I decided, oh, I'm going to do this one piece. I already gave it a title. I was working from a title called Dumb Hope, one word. I don't remember when I thought of that title, but I also knew that I was like, oh, I attached Nirvana to it, so I was like, okay, I know that I want to be listening to Nirvana. I kind of have a weird melancholy, introspective, emotional, like, feeling. Like, I don't really know how to describe it, except Nirvana fits whatever that feeling is. So that is all going to be a part of what I'm painting today. As I mentioned, the piece behind me, the 16 by 20, I gessoed it before. So that was something I had in my mind too, is kind of like, how is this texture going to feel? It needs to somehow complement the rest of the piece, or it needs to give it something to build off of, right? And different textures can feel different, even though you're going to paint over them. The textures that are underneath, the whole point of us putting that on there is so that, you know, it actually does have an effect that you can see and or touch and feel a difference as if it were there or if it were not there. So in saying that, we'll get started with painting this piece right away here. Again, because of YouTube copyright, you're not going to be listening to Nirvana. I will be. I don't know what I'm going to put on for you yet. Couple things before you get started, or before I get started with painting an abstract piece. I also talked a lot about color. So I kind of know the feeling I want to go for, but what colors are going to be a part of that? It's not just about color, it's about color and composition and the texture and everything, but the colors are going to play a huge role in making an abstract piece. So usually I, in advance, kind of like set up what colors I think I'm going to use. I kind of just go through like today I'm using mostly acrylics. I'm starting out that way anyway. And I've just kind of felt like, I don't know, I want some greens, what ends up happening 50% of the time is that I say that I want some of these, and then I just dip into here anyway, and half the time most of the paints come out where I use them, so in some manner. It's very rare that I stick to the colors I have. Sometimes I bring colors out and I don't use them at all. So it's not like a strict thing that I'm going to adhere to, but it's something to keep in mind, and that's where I'm starting, is with those colors. It'll be interesting because it's not a very energetic or aggressive piece, or it won't be. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. The other thing I would say, keep in mind, at least what helps me make my abstracts the way that I make them, is that I don't always adhere to one medium, right? I'm starting off with acrylic. I use acrylic in the majority of my work, but I mean, I also have other things at hand ready to go, and especially for something abstract, everything you do just influences the next thing that you're about to do. So maybe my mood will shift, maybe something will influence something else, and I'll feel like I need something thinner or thicker, or I need to do something, and it's not going to be with acrylic. So having other mediums on hand can be really important. I have amassed so much material, like physical materials to use for texture or to like embed in a piece or whatever, but also just regular or stereotypically traditional art mediums as well. So I mean, on hand I do have other things, like I've got ink here, I've got paint markers in here, I've got nail polish and makeup in here, obviously I have the spray paint here ready to go as well. In these drawers there's also like drawing mediums like oil pastels and chalk pastels and pencils and pencil crayons, so there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I've got oil paints there too. I'm most likely not going to dip into those today. But that's an important thing too, is making sure you actually have everything on hand that you might need, because you don't know where you're gonna go. And there's a lot of improvising. And there's like in this little drawer here, I mean, there's things if I need to do some scraping or you know, like using different like physical metal tools or whatever. I just find that like, yeah, it's really handy to have a bunch of things on hand. I never know where it's going to go, and I don't want to be that limited with just a paintbrush and my fingers and acrylic paint, and that's it. So with that, I'm going to get started. I don't know if I'll interject at all while I'm painting. I'm just going to kind of feel it, but this is kind of how I would start an abstract painting. All the videos that came before it, and then here we are, and now I'm going to start and I'm going to make it, and we're going to see what happens. Actually, I forgot one thing. To talk about, orientation. So the way when I gessoed this, like I don't even remember what I was thinking at the moment of like how I wanted the orientation to be in the end. Usually I have that in mind from the start, and I don't have this huge gap in between preparing a canvas and then painting it. So I don't remember what I wanted originally, but I've looked at it, and it's because this is an abstract piece, right? Like it might change, and the beauty of abstract is that, I mean, if you're going to display it yourself or you're going to sell it, you could flip it any which way, and then it'll still, you know, something might feel better than something else, but usually to an audience, I don't know, it's just whatever. So it's not like, oh, there's a face upside down. Even if there was a face upside down, that might be the way it's supposed to be, right? But I want to decide usually how I want it orientated before I start painting, usually when I'm putting the gesso on. It's in portrait right now. It could be in landscape. It could be like upside down or whatever in landscape. I've decided I usually do most abstracts in landscape, so this one's going to be in portrait. Also because of the gesso and texture and stuff that I put on, I feel like there's some weighting. Like everything's kind of balanced a certain way, and there's a weight to it, and the weight feels differently distributed, like when it's, you know, on its side or something else. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're preparing stuff, is like I like to paint mine the way that I want them to end up, and that's just by feel. I'm like, I think this feels good. Very, very rarely have I ever like turned it to the side or turned it upside down afterwards. It happens, but it's pretty rare. But you're not bound by anything you start with, which is the beauty of not having a plan when you're painting something abstract. It's all just by feel. But anyway, that's something else to keep in mind too, is the orientation. How do you think you want it? You might stick to that, you might change it, you might finish the whole thing and it's on the wall and you're looking at it to see if it's done, and you may be like, no, it looks better if I flip it this way. So, okay, with that we'll get started. So, I've never done this before, and of course I didn't take a bunch of notes, so I'm just interjecting when I have to, when I come up with something or I think of something that's useful. So the bigger the piece, the more important I think this is, but I am going to start with something, like I said, like a certain color and kind of work around that. Everything you do just influences the next step. I find that when I'm working with something abstract, a lot of the time, I start with a color that I almost put on the whole thing, and I know I'm going to cover up a lot of it, but it gives me something to start with rather than just seeing all this blank, either white or gesso or whatever. Instead of seeing all of that, I kind of start with putting down certain colors in certain areas, but obviously I start with one and kind of go from there. All the other colors are going to play off of that in some way. Usually don't, like I said, I usually don't put it there with the intention that it's going to stay, but it's still something that I would want in the piece. There's some people who do underpaintings and things like that, so I mean, there's times where maybe I would spray paint this whole thing real quick and then wait like 10 minutes and then paint over it. Or if I had some like crusty old gray, I had like a bunch of cheap gray acrylics for a long time, and I just put that over pieces and then painted over it after. But anyway. So again, everything just feeds off of something else. So even though this is kind of meant to be like an underpainting or whatever else, there's places where it's lighter and places where it's darker. I just wanted to cover the surface. It's not perfect, but that kind of influences me already because I'm seeing this lighter space here and I kind of like it. There's these heavier parts here and I'm kind of liking where those are situated. So I'm going to play off that. I'm also going to play off the texture that I have going on here. I put it there for a reason. I'm going to use that in the painting as well. So things are just developing the way they do, and you might, even with something like this, so basic, just starting with one color, I've got some things already that are influencing what I'm going to do next, because I want to play with this push and pull. This is already lighter. I think I want to keep that back there and have this like lighter space. I don't know how it's going to develop yet. Maybe it'll do the inverse and I'll want to emphasize that space and make it heavier, maybe. But I like these heavy bits, and I like the fact that this is here and it's kind of open. Okay, so I got to a place, every abstract is different. Sometimes when you do something enough times, you get really formulaic and you kind of feel good about what you're doing. I already knew this one was going to be different for me just because the energy and stuff isn't what I'm used to. But I got to a place, which I don't usually get to, where I've done something and now I need to wait. And I'm really impatient, which is one of the reasons I love abstract painting. But I got to a place where I want to let this watered down paint sit there for a bit. So I'm going to have to let it sit for a bit. I don't think I need it completely dry, but I do want to see what effects it has as it dries, and I do want it to drip a bit. It's also a weird place with this because I'm putting stuff on top that I really like, yet I don't like this and this I really enjoy, and I don't like anything else that's going on yet. So that's going to be a struggle because I'm going to want to keep this stuff, but I'm going to have to go over some parts of it to make it cohesive and whatever else, right? Again, this is just the nature of doing an abstract piece, that it's different every time, even if you've done so many of them. The circumstances you come to the piece are different, the paints you're using, you feel different that day, energy is different, whatever. So I'm going to take 5 and we'll let this dry a bit and see what happens. Okay, so I know that I'm really unhappy with where things are right now, and sometimes when that happens, you got to do something really drastic to switch things up. So in the past, I've thrown canvases or burned them or put holes in them or whatever. Sometimes just covering them with a certain amount of paint, like a lot of dark colors or whatever. I've decided I'm going to grab some spray paint here and kind of alter things a bit because that's just the way things are going. I let this dry for as much as I wanted it to, and now I've got this going on, which is nice, except that I still don't like anything else. So we'll see what happens from here.
Yeah. Yeah.
this thing has taken quite a turn. It looks to me very science fiction-y. Not at all what I thought it was going to be like. I like it objectively, but as for the title and what's happened there and the mood, I feel like this doesn't accurately represent my mood. I feel like I can count on one hand how many times this has happened. And I kind of, the reason why I didn't make this piece for months is because I wasn't really feeling it. And then I thought today I was feeling it, and I don't know how this came out. But it's interesting. Like I said, I'm enjoying it. I just have no idea where this is coming from. But one thing I wanted to mention, because I don't know how I'm going to resolve things yet, I think I'm getting close to a visual conclusion here. How I'm going to navigate that with the concept and the feeling that I had, I don't know. But one thing I wanted to point out was this and this. So there's this balance here. It's too obvious. I feel like it's way too formulaic or strategically balanced. So I want to disrupt that a bit because it just feels too obvious. So that's one thing. I mean, when you maybe think you're finished and you put a piece up on a wall, that might happen. You might notice that. See, and there's an instinct in me that wants to be like, oh, we put some here, let's put some over there. But that would obviously be the opposite of what I want to do. It'll just kind of be the exact same thing again. I wanted to disrupt this area, and I think I did, in such a way that now I have to keep working at it because it's not really looking that great or cohesive because of that disruption. Now, I've got to be careful when I disrupt things because sometimes it can lead to a really big mess, and I have to almost start from scratch. And I mean, that's not really what's going to happen here. But it'll be interesting to see what that little disruption did now that I've paused to, like, talk about it. I feel like I always have to be careful when I either add white or black. I don't use them, well, I shouldn't say I don't use them very often, but I mean, usually in a really colorful piece like this, black is just gonna weight it so much optically. You're gonna be drawn to that. So I mean, if I'm gonna draw your attention here, I need to make sure there's enough going on in the rest of it that your attention's drawn there, or I need to spread this black out and put some somewhere else. It's okay to have a certain weighting and for your eye to be drawn and emphasized to a certain area, but you don't want to have it only focused there and not have the viewer's eye travel everywhere else. So I'm still working at this thing because I've disrupted this area, and I need to resolve that still. So I'd be lying if I said that having to explain everything as I do it isn't throwing me off, because it totally is. It's probably one reason why this ended up this way. But I feel, well, that's what I'm trying to do right now, is explain how I make an abstract painting. So I kind of talked about with this teal that I put down here, that it was there to disrupt the yellow and red because it seemed too, like, obviously balanced with that corner. We disrupted that, and I was like, oh, I'd be tempted to put some teal here too, but I'm not going to do that. We've already got teal in this area anyway, but I didn't want to put it on top. As soon as I added this black, though, I felt like it was too strong, and I needed to start putting it other places, which is what I did. Now again, everything's coming back to balance, and you can see with how precise I've made some of these marks, that earlier it was kind of just like, hey, whatever, everything's playing off each other. Everything still is playing off each other, but now it's much more calculated. I've got this big mass of black, and then I've got numerous other parts of it. So to me, it's not as like obvious because I've got these other areas, and they're little bits of black, but they're many. So with emphasis, I mean, this is a lot of concentration in one area, but it's only one area, and here we've got 4 different areas, and so it's going to balance out that way. Now, we don't want to make anything right in the center ever, because that just seems really cliche and weird. This circle, if we call it that, seems to be drawing your attention right to the center, unfortunately, but I was trying to draw attention to whatever this is that's going on here. This part isn't right in the center of the piece, so I feel okay with that. I feel like things are coming to a place where they're almost finished. I feel like optically things are balanced pretty well, and I think it's almost time to put it on the wall or to lean it up against a wall and kind of take a look at it from a distance, see what I need to fix. I'm going to kind of look at it sitting down still, but one important thing is that you put it up somewhere and you take a step back and then you look at it again. For me, what's really helpful is when I think it's done is to take a picture right away and look at it through my phone, because for some reason that really helps me view it in a way that is like, oh wait, I'm realizing there's all these things here that I wanna fix that are missing or that need to be balanced better. Somehow looking through it through a picture on my phone just helps me figure that out. Whereas if I'm looking at it in person, I'm like, oh, it's done, and then I walk away and I think everything's great, and then I realize, oh, it's not done when I come back to it later to put a finish on it. So let's see what else we can do here. Okay, so while I've been looking at this and adding a couple things, I've realized that this black ink here is too liquidy still. It's not dry enough yet for me to put up without it dripping. I'm really confident with where I'm at right now to being really almost done. Even as I'm talking, I'm looking and I'm realizing there's a couple things that maybe I could like change up just really quick here. So that's what I'm doing right now. But I was also thinking like, okay, you know, this is one of those rare occurrences, like I mentioned, where, you know, my concept shifts while making it. And that just doesn't happen too often with me making anything, especially abstract work. But that's what happened. So, you know, influenced by, that's the thing, usually when I'm in a place, the music is really influencing me, and because I'm listening to the same thing for that duration of time, then it continues along that path, and I don't really have to worry about things like this, where I'm like, oh, something shifted. Well, I didn't change the music. Somehow, part of my mood or something, I didn't notice a drastic shift. But again, maybe it's because I kind of pushed this piece, like I thought I was ready to do it, and I wasn't. It's just a weird thing where, again, I started this a long time ago. Usually when I get the idea for something and I really feel real strong about it, I just do it in that moment. So that's one possible reason as to why maybe things turned out the way they did here. No one can say for sure, but that's one thing that I think might have happened. So, in saying that, I feel like I almost need to abandon that title of Dumb Hope that I had, because this does not feel like that at all. So what I might do is kind of search the songs I listen to, maybe get something from a title from Nirvana. But this really doesn't feel like I said, this feels really science fiction-y to me. I just the colors, the shapes, everything just kind of feels like that. I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see. I was just listening to on a plane, and yeah, I really don't know where it's going to go conceptually. I feel like this is maybe because I wasn't passionate enough about my feeling and what I was feeling, and I was too in between. Because I did kind of feel like, I don't know, I feel a little melancholy, but not as deep as it should have been for that title of Dumb Hope that I was thinking of. The first time I thought of that title, I was in that mood, and so I just wasn't in the same place again, and yet I wanted to do this today because I had time. It's been on my mind. I thought today was the day, and here we are. So again, things happen. I kind of roll with it, and I'm still, visually, objectively, without thinking of those other things that I just mentioned, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. It's really different, I think, for something that I've done. The way that it looks right now, I know that I'd want to put a really glossy finish on this. That's one thing to keep in mind too with the painting. So I think I'm gonna just put it up here for a second and hope that ink doesn't drip. It seems to be dry enough. So, looking at it, and I kind of feel like, I really do feel like it is finished and complete. It's one of those things that takes a long time to figure out, is when do you stop for an abstract piece? When do I stop creating? When do I stop pushing it and pulling it and adding and subtracting? It's really difficult. It's a balance that's really hard to find, and just the only way you get there is by continually doing it over and over and over again. So like I mentioned, I find the best thing is to take a photo and look at the photo to make sure that I'm actually done. So normally I would have this blank space here. I'm going to leave those up there though, those aren't mine. But it'd be better if you have a space that's, you've got a drop sheet or a white cloth or something, and you can leave the piece up there and look at it and take a picture of it. Then there's not all this other stuff distracting us from what's going on here. So anyway, I'm gonna kind of look at what I have here. So when I look through my phone, obviously it doesn't look any different. It's the same thing, but it's a weird phenomenon. I realized when I was still in university that I thought a piece was done and it was on the wall. I took a picture being like, it's done, and then later on I looked at the pictures because I just took them real quick and then I moved on, and I realized, no, there's these things going on that I don't like. It just gave me this different perspective to see things a little clearer. Just like stepping back can do that, and you can kind of see things when you're focused on the piece right there. You don't necessarily see an imbalance or a disruption that you want to fix, and here this is an even further step back in a way. And so checking that out, there's, again, a few things that I might fix up here, because they're just, I don't know, I feel like this spot here is really strong, and that kind of blends more, and I don't know, this is where we get really nitpicky, and I'm like, well, I like the composition of things. I don't know how I would fix that if I were to fix it. It's a much more conscious effort at this point, where instead of just reactionary and just feeling, it's kind of like, hey, we need to resolve this now. How do we do that? I've got some favorite parts, and I've got some parts that I'm not sure about, and this is one of them, and this is another one. I feel like I almost have to blend that with another color or something. And favorite parts, this here is my favorite part right now. I really enjoy this as well. Resolving this down here I really like. this was one of my favorite parts at the beginning, and it's not a favorite as much anymore, but I as a whole, I'm still enjoying what's happening here. Sometimes people sit with paintings for days or weeks before they call it done. I don't do that. Maybe it's something in my art practice in the future that I will sit with things longer, depending on the studio space I have and how I want to work, right? So generally, I still kind of finish things in one sitting and then move on from there. This is a tough one, yeah. I'm trying to think here. I'm now looking at it more. I think I'm okay with this. This is still... I'm not liking it that much. And I think I want to push it back a bit. So I think I'm just going to grab some water here and just kind of make it so that red isn't as strong. Just kind of blending it in there with what else was happening. I could get a cloth, or I could just do it with my hands. I could get a palette knife. I'm just going to use my fingers right now. And kind of just soften it up a bit, because that's what was kind of annoying me. And now that I've done that, I feel like I need to do more with that space, but I don't know what, because I don't want to draw too much attention to it. That's kind of what was the thing I wasn't liking about it, but I think I'll just put a little bit of a... Well, that's more than a little bit. That happens sometimes. A little bit of this kind of gold in here. And I feel like that'll give it the right attention. It softens it up. It still draws attention, but it's not just such a bold red anymore. Got that interference gold. Yeah, I think that looks quite nice now. And then the thing is, well, I've got this gold here, do I need to put it anywhere else? And I feel like what's my instinct is to say, yes, I do. And soften another area up with the same kind of method that's on the other side of the canvas. So I'm going to do that just a bit here. I really feel like that is done. So now I'm going to take another picture. Sometimes you don't even need to take the picture, you just need to look at it through that lens, but I like to actually take the picture. If I feel like I'm in that place where I'm like, well, I don't know where to stop right now, because now I feel like this looks like it's sitting on top, and this looks like it's pushed back, and I want this on top, and I don't know why. I feel like I might actually do something about that right now. So it'd be simple enough as just putting some of that over top. And I feel like now I've got more attention there than here. I just wanted to, I think part of it was this shape, this arc I wanted to disrupt. And I really feel like I just did that. And I think it's effective. Maybe a little more. Maybe we'll add some of this blue that's still sitting there. There we go. And now I've kind of connected these two spaces, which is not what I wanted. So I need to kind of soften it up and kind of erase that. And by doing that, I'm doing so much more than I wanted to do. But I still think I'm happy with those changes. So once again, I've made some changes. I'm going to take another photo. Check it out here. And I'm really happy with that. Yeah, I'm really, as of right now anyway, because again, the longer you sit with it, you might see more things, but right now we've gone back and forth a couple times, and I think I'm pretty satisfied. More so than every other time I said I was satisfied. So I think that is going to do it for this piece. We'll kind of give you some close-ups here. And yeah, that's, well, I don't know what I'm going to do about that title, so maybe I'll figure that out and let you know. But definitely have a lot of different spots that I am quite enjoying. Alright, well, I'll get back to you when I figure out what I'm going to title this thing. So, of course, to be a little cheeky, I want to reference, I guess, if you weren't watching this video and you just saw this piece, you wouldn't have all this background info. But I decided on a title for it, which is Found Nirvana Misplaced. So if you don't think of Nirvana the band, because you don't, if that wasn't part of, you know, your context, you just think of what that word actually means. And then again, the finding of it, the misplacing of it, etc. I feel like this piece has way more energy than how I made it. Usually the energy that I use, like, I don't know how to explain it. This looks way more energetic than I think I was when making it, which is interesting. This piece was just very, very different than what I would usually do, or how my process usually is, because it seems so quick and automatic and everything else. And this, because of having to explain kind of what I'm doing when I'm doing it and take these starts and stops, because my mood was in a weird place, this ended up being a very different piece. So not necessarily a bad thing, but interesting, because just the fact that I chose to film it made it different. I mean, not just that. That's one thing, which is interesting to me. And I think I'm going to stop recording this now so I could actually talk about that in a different video, because that's an interesting thought to me. So we will see you on another time. That was kind of concluding that. I hope that the not the art process videos, I mean those too, but this kind of set of how to make an abstract painting, I hope that it was useful to somebody. I mean, it's my process, everyone's got a different one, and the thing is that things change all the time, every piece is different, but this is, I tried to speak in these big general terms of this is how I would set things up, this is what I would do, and the results vary each time, but this is how I think about my work and my process. And that'll evolve over time, and it has changed from the very beginning. So, yeah, with that, if you'd like to see anything specific or ask me any questions, feel free to do so. I would love to have a conversation or answer some questions. See you on another time.